Keep your mics muted unless you're called on or when we have our happy hour. Our session is being recorded and the chat is being monitored for questions and technical issues. For the Q&A, please use the chat for submitting your questions or use the raise hand feature if you'd like to ask your question verbally. For your optimum experience, use the speaker view, and any disruptive or inappropriate behavior will be grounds for removal. All right, so we'll go into our next session. I'd like to introduce Nancy Gurdon, who is joining us from ODU, and more specifically, the Hampton Roads Maritime Collaborative for Growth and Innovation. Nancy is the Associate Vice President, Institute for Innovation and Entrepreneurship, and the inaugural Executive Director for the Strom Entrepreneurial Center at Old Dominion University, where she leads ODU's strategy and organization for the community and campus seeking economic development, entrepreneurship, and innovation resources. Ms. Gurdon is currently on assignment as the founding executive director for Hampton Roads Maritime Collaborative for Growth and Innovation, HRMC, to strengthen the region's maritime innovation economy, and special assistant to the ODU president for maritime initiatives, co-chairing an ODU strategic plan for global recognition in maritime economic development and innovation. A C-suite executive and entrepreneur throughout her career, she founded, co-founded healthcare and biotech companies such as Amerigroup and Genomind, and previously held executive positions with predecessor bank to Bank of America. She has extensive expertise in entrepreneurship program development and acceleration, public-private partnerships, marketing, and development. She serves on numerous boards for entrepreneurship, education, and civic engagement, chair of 757 Angels, and board executive committees for 757 Accelerate, Norfolk Innovation Corridor, Women in Venture, Entrepreneurship and Business Academy, Kempsville High School, the Norfolk Forum, among others. She holds an MBA for the University of South Carolina, a master's in urban planning from the University of North Carolina, and a bachelor's degree in economics from Bucknell University. She also holds a graduate degree in banking, Stonier Graduate School of Banking, University of Delaware. She was just named 100 people to meet in 2021 by Virginia Business, a group of interesting, innovative, and vital Virginians for her work with HRMC. And we are so pleased to have her today to talk about the great opportunities that are in our area. Go ahead, Nancy.
Well, thank you, Leanne. And I am really very excited to be here today with this organization and to be both a moderator for the session as well as a brief speaker. And my most important message is that the region, the Hampton Roads region, is really seeing the many, many assets and opportunities we have. Some are natural, some are man-made, but the collaborative and the collection is really, really unsurpassed when it comes to creating opportunities for jobs, for companies, and for innovation. And so it's really exciting to be here and to share some of this information. Before I introduce my co-panelist, Admiral Williamson, I do want to spend a few moments on a new organization that's forming here in the region, the Hampton Roads Maritime Collaborative for Growth and Innovation. And Leanne, if you could bring up the slides, that would be great. And by the way, we will take Q&A at the end of the panel. So if you do have questions, by all means, please put them in the chat. So this is the name of the organization. Just a little bit of background. As you'll see on the next slide, literally 1 year ago, Old Dominion University really had looked at how it could be a bigger player in the region as it related to job creation, tech talent, and innovation. So President John Broderick literally asked WN, business leader in our region, and myself to co-lead it. And the important point here is that this was a group of business people and community partners. And one of the first results that came out of this meeting was that we as a group and we as a region really needed to identify this broad definition of maritime as a primary economic driver. Now that may not sound particularly innovative or unique to you, but I have to say there are times when I think our region doesn't fully adopt the many, many opportunities that we have. So this was truly remarkable to have a wide-ranging group of business people and the university really focus on this to be a major driver. So the good news is there's a lot happening in our region. Obviously, we're going to hear quite a lot about that today from the various presentations. But as you'll see on the next slide, you know, the unfortunate thing, or maybe the good thing, not coordinated, is that there's many activities happening. It's everything from new emerging industries like offshore wind, which you'll hear about later. Obviously, we have a lot of players, the port, the Navy. We have a lot of new emerging areas in data analytics. We have many companies that are getting involved now. We have universities. So the good news is we have a lot of these opportunities, but the concern is that they're either potentially competing, or more importantly, we're missing what we like to call the 1 + 1 = 3 effect, where we're not really leveraging some of the programs and work that we need to do. So that was really the impetus for forming the collaborative, which you'll see on the next slide, is really an umbrella organization. And we're in the process of putting together the 501c3. It's a group of business leaders. We have representatives from the Navy. We have representatives from economic development organizations, universities, and it's a very broad-based coalition. And we've already identified 8 major initiatives that we believe are really critical for the region overall and for the Commonwealth of Virginia. So I'm going to spend a moment on a couple of them. I'm going to skip over MIBE because our speaker is really going to spend quite a lot of time, since that's really one of the lead activities. But I'm going to talk about the other ones that include, as you can see, offshore wind, a major role for ODU in this ecosystem, talent, the need for talent, the need for continuing to build out our supply base, looking at resilience and the whole opportunities and potential barriers of sea level rise and flooding, and then of course innovation, as we know we need to embrace moving ahead. So the group is really here to be a thought leadership and coordinating entity. So as you'll see on the next couple slides, these are just a couple of data points about each of the initiatives. The next one, which is MIBE, I'm going to skip over because Admiral Williamson will be speaking about that. The second one is offshore wind. Again, we have a number of panelists speaking about this. This is an amazing opportunity for our region and our country in terms of building a whole brand new industry that has implications for economic development training. And again, you'll hear more about that. The message here is that it's part of this broad-based collaborative. Next slide. Talent is extremely important. And I'm proud to say one of our partners is the Hampton Roads Maritime workforce development work that's being done by the Hampton Roads Workforce Council. They have actually recently won a Go Virginia grant to pull together all of the array of training that happened from K through 12 apprenticeship programs, community colleges, four-year colleges, and so on, to really think through, do we have the right, not only training array, but are we able to match it with market demands from the maritime industry? And it's really exciting to see that they're building a platform really to do this. So rather than a bunch of one-time studies, which are obviously dated the minute they are published, the whole idea is to create a system, which is really pretty exciting and a huge opportunity here for our region. Another big area is on the next slide, which relates to, well, this is a little bit more on the talent implementation, sort of how the process works by looking at what are the opportunities that are needed, what are the priorities, what are the key occupations today, and more importantly in the future, how can we make sure that we have training programs that are available, how do we recruit and train, and then obviously placement. And the important point here is that we have a number of certainly industries that rely on a lot of this core talent. And we certainly want to make sure that we have an array of training, but also an array of opportunities so that none of them will go underserved. The next area that we're focusing on is supply chain and supply base. It really very important because it relates not only to the current Navy sustainment that we have here in our region, but also, once again, the offshore wind industry that's continuing to build out. So I'm very excited to talk about the fact that a number of organizations such as 757 Alliance and others are really looking at the way to continue to bring and support industry that will support these leading industries and the Navy by having companies that are actually here in the region thinking about their supply chains and obviously finding opportunities where, again, 1 + 1 = 3. So again, very, very important area. And for those of you who probably know, I should have made this a trivia question. That's actually the wall of VMA's building in downtown Norfolk. Next slide. Resilience. We often overlook or say somebody else can deal with this. And this is an important area that the collaborative has identified in 2 reasons. We're planning to partner with the new Institute for Coastal Adaptation and Resilience, ICAR. We're in the process actually for that organization of identifying its very first executive director. And really what this organization would do, and the whole point of including resilience, is to really make sure that we're identifying and addressing any barriers and concerns, but also to see where areas of innovation can apply. And these can be areas of technology innovation, they can be policy innovation, they can be retrofit. There are a number of possibilities. And so we really feel it's important to incorporate this whole area as we think about what maritime can mean for our entire region. Next slide. ODU, one of the big maybe aha moments is the role that an anchor university can play across many, many dimensions: research, training, community support, research, and innovation. And so ODU has really been identified not only from a community perspective, but we inside the university really believe that we have the initiative, the background already in terms of programming that we offer, but more importantly, the strategic viewpoint to really be seen as a globally recognized leader in maritime. So we literally have within Old Dominion a task force that is meeting every week, identifying all of the programs that we already offer, and then more importantly, looking at where we can actually be strategic in being a major resource for our whole industry and our whole region in this broad area. So what was a little bit astounding to even us, as you'll see on the next slide, is that we have already identified at Old Dominion over 60 degree programs that exist today. They're either in our supply base and supply chain areas around the port, a number of areas in engineering, a number of areas in geospatial mapping, a number of areas in modeling and simulation. Obviously, on the next slide, as you'll see, a number of areas that have to do with cybersecurity. So it's what we have today, and the point here is that we have the programs, but they tend to be broad, not so much deep. And so one of our challenges at ODU, and this is where we are really delighted to have so much feedback from those of you representing all of the community partners here to give us feedback as a university about where we can actually devote more time, energy, and resources to serve you as well. So again, this is just a quick sample of what we already have moving ahead, and we really plan to be a major player in this ecosystem. On the next slide, the final one is really around innovation. Certainly, this is a major topic of the conference here today, but there are a number of areas that we're really excited about. First of all, we're very excited to continue to work with the Navy. They have recently announced that the Mid-Atlantic Tech Bridge is being opened here in Hampton Roads. It's one of 12 across the country. And we are really looking forward to partnering with that organization, and in fact already have targeted a company that will be coming to the region that's very involved in the cold spray technology that we are really wanting to introduce to the community at large, and to work obviously very closely with the Navy. So that's merely one example. There are so many other new areas of innovation happening in our region that have not yet been connected into maritime. That have to do with cybersecurity, unmanned vehicles, innovation overall to support startups. And in the next few slides, I'm just going to touch on a couple of them just to give you a flavor of where we need to, quote unquote, connect some dots that really can support the maritime area. So as you'll see on the next slide, we already have some very exciting applied research going on in digital shipbuilding, which is a partnership with Newport News Shipbuilding and ODU. We have a location at Brooks Crossing in Newport News. And the whole exciting area here is really being able to think about and imagine this not only for Navy, but it can be used for other maritime and other sectors. So this is actually an opportunity from everything from K through 12 to corporations to really imagine and use these new technologies and how they can be continually to be built out for shipbuilding and also space. On the next slide. Visa, this is another presentation you'll hear later from David Bowles, but this is another exciting partner in maritime, given all the possibilities of working with them on unmanned vehicles that relate to the whole maritime industry. And again, I'm going to let Dave talk more about that, but we really see this as being another partner in this ecosystem. Next slide. Arise, I imagine he'll talk more about this. This is a very exciting also workforce development program here in the region based out of Fort Monroe. Includes a lot of other universities and other industry partners. And the whole idea is to really continue to build out capacity, not only for the technology, but the workforce and the training, because obviously these things go hand in hand. This is an amazing opportunity, which is going to have a lot of benefit for our region and for maritime. Next slide. Cybersecurity. Old Dominion 5 years ago started from zero, a school of cybersecurity. We now today have over 800, in fact, I think that number is over 900 students. Everyone who's graduated, no surprise, has been placed. And we have an amazing array of programs and partnerships in this very vital area. We've also been designated as a node in the region's cybersecurity programs, although we work with other universities, of course, as well. And what's very exciting about this is the faculty who lead this institute have already begun to identify some very specific maritime related cyber programs that could be offered as certificates, classes, and degree programs. So really a lot more to come in this very exciting area because we have the fortune of a school here focused on this with some great talent. Next slide. And lastly, I want to mention another resource in the region called the Open Seas Technology Hub. This organization is focused on innovation, as you can see, in solving wicked and difficult problems in maritime. We have a whole array of areas from maritime port operations and blue water ops, obviously offshore wind that we'll be talking about, flooding and coastal resilience, and aquaculture. And the whole idea is to identify problems and opportunities and how can innovation and technology solve them. So what they're doing right now is actually in the process of having some work with some small companies that are really bringing some really quite innovative technologies into this area. So the point of simply going through some of these is simply to leave a picture for you today that this region is really very fortunate to have not only the amazing assets with the Navy, the port, all of the areas we've had and known so well over the years, the new industries coming with offshore wind, and now a number of new innovative areas in innovation. And so our challenge as a region is really, how do we bring all this together? You know, how do we actually leverage this for the benefit of the entire area? Next slide. And I just want to focus to close that our president, John Broderick, has obviously identified this as one of the major initiatives for Old Dominion University. So we certainly want to do our part as an organization here in the region and Commonwealth to really lead the way. And we are focused on making some recommendations in early spring. Next slide. So to close, I would actually like to close on my section by highlighting again the fact that this organization is really partnering to look at all the opportunities and coordination. And it's really a good introduction for my panelists and my excitement to really introduce not only certainly someone known to every one of you, but someone I consider a personal colleague. So I'd now like to introduce Rear Admiral Brad Williamson. He's now retired. He today heads up as executive director the Hampton Roads Maritime Industrial Base Ecosystem, known as MIBE, which is one of the major leaders and certainly a partner in our group for the HRMC. A little bit of background about him. Admiral Williamson is a 1985 graduate of the United States Naval Academy. He received a Master of Science in National Security Strategy from the National War College in 2001. and has completed executive education at the University of Virginia's Darden School and at Harvard's John F. Kennedy School. A career U.S. Navy surface warfare officer, his assignments have included command of the USS Thunderbolt and Destroyer Squadron 2. As a flag officer, he served as Chief of Staff, Naval Striking and Support Services, Forces NATO in Lisbon, Portugal, and deployed as the commander, Standing NATO Maritime Group 2, where he led the largest group of NATO ships ever into the Black Sea at a time of heightened tensions, and also led NATO's maritime counterterrorism and anti-piracy operations. His final military assignment was as the 32nd Commandant of the Joint Forces Staff College in Norfolk, Virginia. But there's more. After his naval service, he was the founder and CEO of MVSEA LLC, was the Director of Strategic Initiatives for Systems Planning and Analysis, SPA, which is a defense contracting consulting company in Alexandria, and was the Chief Operating Officer at ITA International, a defense integrating services provider in Newport News. Aside from leading MIBE, he is serving as chairman of the Virginia Peninsula Chamber of Commerce Military Affairs Council, a board member for the Center for American Studies at Christopher Newport University, and on the board of Tidewater Area Service Contracts, TASC. So it's my pleasure and my honor to introduce Admiral Williamson to you. Over to you, Brad.
Thank you so much, Nancy. I really appreciate those thoughts. Whenever I hear someone read my bio now, I just realize how old I must be. So thanks for that. To everyone here, thanks so much for joining us today for this discussion. And as someone who spent most of my life sailing on the water, contrary to perhaps the 3-star that Admiral Handley mentioned earlier, I do appreciate the support that we always got from the shore infrastructure. Without that support and the maintenance work that goes on for surface ships, we can survive at sea for a little while before that all comes crumbling down if we don't have the right infrastructure support. When I kind of transitioned from my previous position, I was going to be content to kind of do my own consulting work again, but when this position with MIBE became available, it seemed it was kind of too much of a perfect match, not only for my background, but more importantly for what I'm passionate about, which is supporting our Navy. And so I was fortunate to come into this position in April of this year. If we could bring up the slide deck, I'm going to walk through these slides. I promise not to do what I had college professors do to me and read slide decks to people. But for you, I encourage you to read the words on there because they are important. First of all, when we talk about the Hampton Roads Maritime Industrial Base ecosystem, the first part of that is Hampton Roads, and lots of people have their own kind of definition. And so if you go to the next slide, when we talk about Hampton Roads, what we're talking about is a 2,800 square mile geographic area. We house 20 military facilities of various sizes, from the largest in the nation to some of the smaller ones. And we encompass 19 municipalities. That's 16 in Virginia and 3 in North Carolina. And anybody who's lived in the Hampton Roads area for any given period of time knows that, we have people that live in North Carolina that drive to the naval base every day. We have people who live where I do up here in Yorktown, Virginia, and I drive to Suffolk every day. And so all of those 19 municipalities really support the maritime industrial base here in Hampton Roads. We have about 400 resident defense firms and 9 shipyards that, to go back again to the earlier discussion, really support the fleet in an incredible way to make sure that we have that battle force ready to sail. We are, by all statistical measures, the largest naval defense manufacturing community in the country. The Office of Economic Adjustment, their statistics indicate that Virginia ranks first in the percent of our GDP here in Virginia that comes from defense contracting. We rank second in terms of real dollars behind California, which is obviously a much larger state. and the number one recipient of those contract dollars is Huntington Ingalls via their Newport News shipbuilding division here in Newport News. And so that's important because, as has been mentioned earlier, that economic activity really sustains this area, specifically in times of duress, like we've lived through in the past 10 months. And so those sustaining factors that are provided by that defense contracting and our military bases and number of retirees here in Hampton Roads sustain this economy during times of economic turndown. We've seen this twice now in the last 20 years, once in 2007-8, and again this year, where we didn't suffer as badly here in Hampton Roads as some of the other areas in the country. If you see the last bullet there, we employ about 50,000 people in the naval sustainment ecosystem here in Hampton Roads. And that's important because obviously, if you look at the size of Hampton Roads, if those 50,000 jobs went away, it would have an incredible negative impact here. If you could go to the next slide, please. So how did MIBE come about? In 2018, some senior leadership at Newport News Shipbuilding, as they were looking at growing their workforce to be able to do the work that they anticipated they were going to do based on the Navy's plans, one of the things that they realized is that as they incentivized their workforce, i.e. as they paid more money to get the workforce they needed, that in many cases they were stealing those workers, say a welder, from one of their own tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 suppliers and subcontractors. And therefore, the subcomponent that subcontractor was going to build to support Newport News shipbuilding as the prime wasn't able to be delivered on time, or perhaps was of lesser quality. And so that leadership at Newport News Shipbuilding started asking the question, well, who's looking at this holistically across Hampton Roads to ensure that we have the actual workforce we need to do all of the work that we expect to do here in Hampton Roads? And the answer to that question was really nobody. And so the people at the time got all the maritime stakeholders together. They launched an initiative that at the time was called America Builds and Repairs Great Ships. And they set after trying to really do an assessment of where we were with respect to the Hampton Roads Maritime Industrial Base. And so that name changed in January of 2019 based on our discussions with the Navy. The Navy is very enamored with the idea of ecosystems. And the reason that they are is because what they're really looking for is successful regional models that they can apply across the nation. And so if we can establish a well-functioning maritime industrial base ecosystem here in Hampton Roads, then potentially we could apply that model to, say, Jacksonville or San Diego or the Pac Northwest or the Gulf Coast. And so the name was changed to the Hampton Roads Maritime Industrial Base Ecosystem back in January of 2019. Our mission, as we see it right now, is to integrate all the maritime stakeholders here in Hampton Roads and to foster the partnerships we need both inside Hampton Roads and outside Hampton Roads to sustain and expand our maritime efforts here. We kind of focus on four things: the regional workforce, our supply chains, and our facilities. And we do that with an overlay of how we can apply the latest Industry 4.0 and 5.0 technologies across those areas. And so if you could think of that as three pillars of workforce, supply chain, and facilities, with innovation and advanced technology overlaid over top of those pillars. And our bottom line is we want to ensure a ready and relevant Navy and a growing and vibrant commercial shipping economy for Hampton Roads. And that's our mission. Next slide. This is our current structure. Vice Admiral retired Dave Archizeld, who goes by Arch, really helped kick off and lead this effort. He is now really chairing the HRMC effort as well that Nancy spoke about. Underneath Arch, we have two co-vice chairs, Vice Admiral retired Herm Shalansky, who's the head of BD at Newport News Shipbuilding, and Dr. Eric Weisel, who's the director of VMAS, the Virginia Modeling Analysis and Simulation Center. Those co-chairs are supported by a 13-member strategy board. That strategy board consists of local non-governmental organizations, academic leaders, and industry leaders here in Hampton Roads. So we try and keep a diverse mix, so we don't get kind of a little bit of groupthink going on by having a bunch of either academics or industry people. We want to make sure we're getting a good cross perspective, and we're supported by right now what is a 74-member advisory board. The 4 pillars you see underneath are the ones we talked about already. And then over to the left, you see myself as the executive director, Alan Baker, who's the program manager, and we have other staff support that's provided by VMASC in our offices over in Suffolk. Just a little note there, you heard Nancy speak about the Virginia Digital Shipbuilding Program. I also oversee that program. I have an assistant director who really does all the day-to-day, but I just kind of provide linkage between their efforts and what we're doing at MIBE, and making sure that we're not creating inefficiencies, and instead figuring out how to work together with the efforts that they're doing on a day-to-day basis. So that's it there. Next slide. So, what is our real purpose? Our vision is that the Hampton Roads is recognized as the center of the maritime industry in the United States. Now, for those of us who live here, and if you looked at the data I just quoted with respect to the amount of defense contracting dollars that are spent here, if you combine with that the fact that we had the largest naval base in Norfolk, and we also have the 5th largest port in the United States in the Port of Virginia, there is no other area in the country that brings those 3 major things together. Probably the closest would be either San Diego or perhaps Los Angeles without the military flavor. But there is no other area that has those 3 things. And we think we rightfully should be the center of the maritime industry in the United States. For people who live here, I think a lot of people think we are, but I can tell you that we need to do a better job articulating that, especially the national organizations and national leaders, and support the efforts that are ongoing here by getting that word out. And so what we want to do is we want to integrate our industry, academic, and trade organizations along with our government, non-government stakeholders to make sure that we're figuring out how to get that message out, and that we work on those things that we talked about, our workforce, our supply chain, implementing innovative technologies, and making sure our facilities are world-class. When we think of how we get to that vision, our strategy is aligned around 4 pillars. And I'm going to talk about each one of those because I think they're all very important. The first one, communicate, motivate, and educate. As we look at the maritime workforce, one of the biggest issues we face is attracting younger and a more diverse population into the maritime trades. And that's important because most people right now, when they look at, do I want to go be a welder or a rigger or a pipe fitter, they don't have positive views of those career paths. And we've got to figure out how to turn that around. And one of the things that I carry forward in a lot of my briefs, especially when I'm briefing Navy folks, is the workforce that will work on the Columbia class, that when it is at program peak, i.e. when it's in one platform a year, that workforce is currently between kindergarten and 9th grade. And so that is our target audience for the people that we need to attract into the maritime trades to support that workforce when that program is fully up and running. And so we have to figure out how to get our word out that these career paths, not only are they well paying, but all of them provide avenues for growth and for long-term success, the ability to move up into supervisory roles and even into major leadership roles. And so, we want to make sure that we're communicating that, and we really have to get down and work with our municipalities and associated school districts to get down into middle schools and the high schools and start driving that message down to the people that will actually form that workforce in the years ahead. Innovate, that's really important to us. When we talk about workforce, for example, if we can apply technology that takes a workforce requirement of 10 people and drives it down to 1 or 2, we can make significant inroads into the potential shortfalls that we see in the workforce. And so the ability to apply those technologies, it was interesting, Admiral Hanley made the note earlier talking about, efficiency and effectiveness. My son, who's an economist, often says to me, you can't be effective if you're not being efficient. There's no such thing as effectiveness without efficiency because you're wasting something if you're not being efficient. And that sticks with me when we talk about this. And one of the things that we see right now in Hampton Roads, and I think Nancy touched on this a little bit, we have so many programs that are trying to get after this problem, but they're not integrated. And because they're not integrated, they're not efficient. And so one of the things that we really try and do is figure out how we're going to integrate those programs. And I'll get to that in a second. The third thing you see there in our strategy is to lead and define. We are not going to be passive players who sit back and just see how things work out. We want to drive the integration of the stakeholders here in Hampton Roads across the academic industry and government, non-government partners. And we want to also work with the Navy in a really integrated way to make sure that we're creating the right workforce that will meet their needs. You heard the 30-year shipbuilding plan mentioned earlier. That's one of the key things for us because it defines what we think the Navy requirement is going to be in the years ahead. And that Navy requirement is part of a larger requirement here in Hampton Roads, and understanding the totality of that is really the first step in understanding what the workforce requirements are going to be. Excuse me. And then the last thing, as I already mentioned, we want to integrate all these stakeholders. If someone's creating a welding program that's going to produce, X number of welders, somewhere down in, say, Portsmouth, how that fits in with the other welding programs here in Hampton Roads is really something that we should all want to consider, because one of the things that we've seen here is a lot of the programs that we have right now are turning out people who are not qualified to be employed. And we can't keep doing that. And there are several reasons for that. Some of it is that we have people going through these programs who haven't been properly pre-screened to ensure that they meet the requirements to work in a Navy shipyard environment with respect to security. In other cases, the people that are executing those programs haven't properly communicated with industry partners to understand what their requirements are. And so someone might come out with a certain level of qualification or certification, but that's not the certification that the industry partner needs to actually do the work. And so we have to figure out how to close those gaps and seams, again, to create that efficiency that we really need. Next slide. So I'm going to talk about a couple of things. In the initial, in the past 18 months, we received funding from the Pentagon's Office of Economic Adjustment. We conducted what we refer to as phase 1 assessments on both the regional workforce and the supply base. And some interesting things came out of that. And perhaps the first one you see up there, the Regional Maritime Future Skills Framework and Gap Analysis, which we completed in March of this year. The end result of that is we anticipate that we are going to be 8,000 skilled tradesmen short of the requirement by 2025 or 2026 here in Hampton Roads. And that's a significant number. That is not 8,000 new employees. That's 8,000 on top of the normal attrition and resupply rate for the workforce. And so to get to that number, again, we cannot continue to have programs that are working in an efficient manner in order to produce that extra 8,000 skilled tradesmen over the next 5 to 6 years. And so that assessment carries forward into where we focus going forward. On the supply-based side, one of the biggest things that we did was the standardized supplier technical assessment and validation system, which was basically how large primes evaluate their subcontractors and their ability to complete that work. And in speaking to some of those subcontractors, they found that process very valuable because it allowed them to do an honest assessment of their companies and determine where they needed to insert resources to meet the requirements to support those prime contractors. However, what we don't want is those subcontractors to have to do that assessment every time they want to support one of the large primes here in Hampton Roads. And so our efforts there are focused on creating a web-based tool that both the primes and the subcontractors can use, so that once that assessment is done, it remains resident in that system. And then that subcontractor can go to work for all the different primes without having to be reassessed every time they want to do that work. And that's especially important as you go further down the supply chain into the tier 3 and 4 suppliers who really don't have the resources to be able to do those types of assessments over and over again. And so it's one of the largest complaints that we've heard from them. And those tier 3 and 4 suppliers, I can tell you in a lot of cases, we're down to one of them. And so we really need to figure out how to help sustain them because they're critical to the work that the primes do. Right now, we have several things going on. I'm going to really touch on a couple of them down there. If you're not aware, the city of Danville, Virginia, has perhaps the best trades training program in the country right now. That effort was begun several years ago. I can tell you that they had a very generous corporate sponsor in Phillips Corporation, and they've made about a $67 million investment in training the workforce there. And they implemented the program in the middle schools, the high schools, and the community colleges there in Danville. It is perhaps the best model of what can be accomplished to support trades training and certification. And the most impressive thing about it is there are students who are coming out of the community college program, which is the culminating program in that system. They have 100% higher rate to go to work for companies. The program is so successful that Danville is now attracting not just national, but international companies to headquarter in Danville, Virginia, because they know they have the workforce that will be able to support that work. We're partnered with them. We hope to be able to submit Defense Manufacturing Community Support Program solicitation this year with them. And we continue to try and learn from what they've already accomplished out there. The second thing you see there is the Office of Economic Adjustment, where we've submitted a grant application to them to support our work going forward for the next 2 years. The National Shipbuilding Research Program, we'll brief them this week, actually tomorrow, on some of our pilot projects that carry forward the phase 1 work we've already done and start to get after actually addressing the problem. And so we look forward to working with them. If you're not familiar with them, that program is run out of the Pentagon, but it's supported by both industry and Navy partners. And it's really an important part of what we think we can do with respect to the workforce and the curriculum needed to properly train that workforce going forward. I won't really discuss the other things that are kind of down in the weeds, but we do have a very close relationship with the Navy. We have a biweekly meeting where we talk to Navy leadership out of the Navy Sustainment Office about the efforts that we're doing. And we always want to make sure that we're aligned with where they see things going and making sure that we think we can address their issues and problems going forward. Next slide. So just talking about this for a little bit, we have several factors that will impact the workforce here over the coming years. One is the fact that the current workforce is aging. At last count, the average age of of the maritime trades workforce here in Hampton Roads was 52 years old. And so what we expect is that actually that workforce will be retiring at an accelerated rate as we go through the next decade. And so that means that just the number to sustain that workforce will go up. You heard me talk about our current inability to attract younger and a more diverse workforce into the skilled trades. We have to figure out how to do better there. And again, you heard people say, if we're going to grow the Navy from 296 ships to 355 ships, that's an increase, not only ship construction requirement, but the maintenance modernization of the current platforms, much of that which we would like to see occur here in Hampton Roads. The other factors that we have is we have, as you heard Nancy talk about, a large offshore wind project that's commencing here in Hampton Roads. Some of the people that are required to support that work are the same maritime tradesmen who support the ship repair industry right now. And we also have the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel Expansion Project, which will happen the same time as the offshore wind project over the next 5 to 6 years. And while many of those jobs are not direct competitors with the skilled tradespeople that we have, they are a competitor for the actual people who might go into the maritime trades, but instead to decide to undertake that work effort to support that program. And so there will be an impact to our ability to attract people into the maritime trades because of that. And so, again, knowing that we have lots of people who have really dedicated themselves to address and get after these issues here in Hampton Roads, the reality is we have to figure out how to integrate these programs and really understand if we're going to get to the number that we know we need in the next 5 to 6 years, how we're going to systematically go about doing that. And where we're at right now is we're working with government organizations. I had a great conversation with Mayor Alexander in Norfolk about a week and a half ago. And we know we have to do something big. We probably have to do it in more than one location to create really large scale career and technical education hubs that can support the throughput that we need to get after the maritime workforce requirement. But we need to do that while we're supporting the current programs and figuring out how to better integrate them to provide the workforce that we need. So we can't just throw out everything we have. We have to figure out how to do better with what we have while we're creating that large scale thing, perhaps mirroring what we saw out in Danville in a couple of locations here in Hampton Roads. And we've got strong support from a lot of key players. And now it's about really getting the resources and the investment we need to be able to bring those things into reality. Next slide. This is just a list of some of our key partners here, and I won't read those to you, but you know, we're not going to get after this on our own. And you know, one of the things that we try and say frequently here at MIBE, you know, in the words of Harry Truman, it's amazing what you can accomplish when you don't care who gets the credit. We don't really care who gets the credit, but we've got an issue here, and we have to get after it. And as we move forward now in our phase 2 work, one of the things that we're saying to people is we have to stop admiring the problem. Okay, we know what the issues are, the major issues, and now what we have to get about is addressing them and fixing them. Because if we don't do that, we're not going to be able to meet the requirement. One of the things you heard Admiral Hanley say earlier, the Navy will not get to its goal. It will not build its way to its goal. It may sustain its way and modernize its way to its goal of 355 ships, but you can't build fast enough to get there. But if we can modernize the current DDG force, for example, and figure out how to keep them relevant and extend their service lives, you know, to 35 or 40 years, then you can get to a 355 ship Navy. That work to do that kind of repair and modernization is at risk here in Hampton Roads. When we look at the hierarchy of how work will be done here in Hampton Roads, I can, you know, I kind of portray it this way. The offshore wind workforce will get the people they need because from a financial standpoint, Dominion Energy knows that once those turbines are up and in place, it affects their bottom line. But once that field is producing electricity. So they're going to get the workforce they need. And to be honest, the ship construction efforts here are going to get the workforce that they need. From the Navy's perspective, Hampton Roads is the only builder of nuclear aircraft carriers and one of only 2 builders of nuclear submarines. That workforce will be supported. What is at risk is the ship repair and maintenance and modernization work for our surface ships. To be honest, where the Navy has options, the Navy can move that work elsewhere if we're not able to support it. And so we have to get about figuring out how we're going to be ready to support that work as it comes forward here in the next 5 to 10 years. And what we don't want is to complete the offshore wind work, complete the Hampton Roads Bridge tunnel work, but the Navy had to move that ship repair work elsewhere. And now in 2026, 2027, et cetera, not only is that other work done, but the ship repair and maintenance work has gone elsewhere because that would be a dramatic downturn in our maritime industry here in Hampton Roads. I'll stop there. Next slide, I think, is just our point of contact information here at MIBE. As I said, if you're not one of those organizations listed that we already work with, if there's something we can do to support your efforts, and if your efforts support the maritime industry here in Hampton Roads, we're happy to be a part of it. Please reach out and let me know what I can do for you. I'll stop there and happy to take any questions.
Yes, so please feel free to enter some questions in the chat and we will be happy to take them. Maybe in the interim while we're waiting, Brad, I'd like to ask you a question. First of all, thank you. This was an extremely comprehensive presentation and you really highlighted, I think, a number of both the challenges and opportunities we have in the region. So thank you for that. If you could maybe fast forward in your for yourself, thinking about the region or from MIBE, whichever way you want to do it. Imagine, say, three years out, not far, not 10 years, not 20, 3 to 5. What would you imagine would be a winning solution? What should we be doing as a region, maybe that we're just not doing now? Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think, if I saw Nirvana down the road, I kind of have 3, 5, 10 year kind of milestones. And, in 3 years, what we would have is really robust programs implemented in both the high school and the middle school levels that are really highlighting the potential for these careers to people, students in those grades. Rightly or wrongly, the emphasis in many of our school districts here in Hampton Roads over the past decade has been how do we get everyone to college? And that's as someone who's been through college, if your goal is to go to college, more power to you. But the reality is we have many, many students, actually more than half the students that don't go to college. And for the well-being, and not only of them, but of our economy here in Hampton Roads, the maritime trades provide an exceptional, option for those students. And if we can figure out how to get their interest in those career fields at an earlier age, and figure out how to communicate and market the fact that these are long-term careers. One of the people I really admire here in Hampton Roads is Jorge Rivera from East Coast Repair. He started out as a welder's helper and he now runs his own shipyard. And so I think it's really an exceptional model of what can happen, that once people get into these trades and they see the opportunities they're able to move up and be part of running these organizations. And so we, in a 3-year time frame, getting those robust programs set up in the middle schools and the high schools would be my big goal. And then feeding a community college system that's ready to take the curriculum from where these students came out at the high school level and get them through that community college program that actually meets the requirements of the employers. So that's kind of the 3-year goal. In the 5-year goal would be to have all that happen and also to stand up 2 large career training and education hubs, one on the south side somewhere, one on the peninsula, or perhaps over in Suffolk or over in that part of Hampton Roads, and perhaps more than 2. But at least 2 that are able to really do this in a larger scale manner, where we have standardized curriculum that's being executed, that's meeting the employer's needs across Hampton Roads, and that it's done in a really robust, technically advanced, and standardized way that we know we're producing the people that the industries need. One of the potential partners there is Synedia, which is a MIBE-like organization up in New England. They just received $18.6 million grant from the IBAS program out of the Pentagon to do exactly this. And they support Electric Boat, which is the other half of the nuclear submarine builders. And so there's a logical connection point to what they're trying to do up there to Newport News Shipbuilding, their submarine work here, as well as all the subcontractors that support that submarine work here in Hampton Roads. And so they're getting after it up there. We want to do the same thing down here. And then 10 years down the road, what I see is that not only do we have these career and technical education hubs set up, not only do we have robust programs at the middle school and high school levels, not only are we supporting the maritime industry and really recognized as the center of that here in the United States, but that those trades programs are attracting other businesses here to Hampton Roads because they know that we can produce that really cutting edge trades workforce that can support not only maritime, but all the other industries that require that kind of work, whether it's offshore wind and everything else. And so, that's what we've seen happen out in Danville, although perhaps at a much smaller level because of the location there. But we could do something big here in Hampton Roads that would really, really be dramatic. And I know that, what you're looking at there at the Hampton Roads Maritime Collaborative is aligned with this. And so that's where we're trying to get to.
I am going to use this recording. This is awesome. It's very well articulated because oftentimes we don't sort of stop and think, what do we need to do? Not just in the moment, but like you say, these couple and have a vision for this that's doable, not just an imaginary sort of thing. So we have a couple questions in the chat. First question is, how can members of the industry effectively engage and support the efforts of MIBE?
Yeah, well, we're always interested in having industry partners be part of our discussion. If you're out there and you're an industry partner and I'm willing to come talk to you individually about how you might support. We have spots both on the advisory council and on the strategy board that open up, and we just added 2 industry partners to fill out that vacancies on that strategy board. But more importantly, as we move forward and we start to execute some of this stuff, we're going to be looking as we execute these projects for industry partners that want to help with these pilot projects. So as we develop and implement standardized curriculum for tradespeople, we're going to look for industry SMEs that could come in and help us develop those. And so happy to have you as part of the team.
So they can literally reach out to you and Alan. Would that be the best?
Yeah, either one of us, both of us, and we'll have a one-on-one and figure out how they can support us, but more importantly, how we can support them.
So a couple other questions. Is the Newport News Apprenticeship School certified to produce the technical grads that the maritime industry needs in the local industry? Yeah,
the apprentice school really has a slightly different mission. What I will tell you is Larry Horn is the head of our workforce component. Larry is a Newport News shipbuilding employee. He helped develop the Maritime Trades Training Program that's used by VISR at Tidewater Community College. And he's working with us right now on our initiatives. One of the things that we see that is really something that if we're going to be honest and look forward and talk about the workforce needs, there is some concern from smaller, repair facilities in Hampton Roads that as we move toward a standardized certification of employees, that it sets them up to lose employees to larger organizations. And so we're working with Newport News Shipbuilding and with other industry partners to ensure that as we develop a standardized kind of workforce curriculum, that we understand how that will benefit our smaller industry partners as well. If you think of this as, I like to use the medical community as an example. If you go to a great medical school, say you go to, University of Pennsylvania, and you get a degree from University of Pennsylvania, the reason that that's so highly touted is because the expectation is you're going to have a 100% success rate in passing the certification boards. You need to go out and be a doctor or a nurse, et cetera. But those standardized certifications that are done by the states and at the national level, they allow smaller schools to provide those same type of employees. And so once you pass that state certification board, whether you came from a smaller program or a world-class program, it doesn't really matter. You have that certification. And then when that person goes to work somewhere, the fact they have that certification is what allows them to operate. When we talk to the Navy, what we want to do is we get through a standardized certification and credentialing process, that it doesn't matter if you're a 5-person shop over here. If your people are certified to the standard, they can do that work for the Navy. And that actually gives that smaller shop an advantage because they're saying, hey, our people are qualified too. Coming from, the defense contracting world, you see this a lot in things like ISO certification. So it doesn't matter if you're Northrop Grumman or a local company here. If you get those ISO certifications or the financial audits done, it allows you to compete on defense contracting at the same level by saying, we have the same certifications that you might expect to see in a larger company. And so if we can articulate that and get that down the right way, what we're really saying is all 400 of those people in Hampton Roads all have the same certification to do the work. And so it actually might give those smaller companies the ability to compete where they might not have been able to compete before. But I'd be lying if I would say to you that there's not growing pains involved in figuring out how to do that in a way where they don't feel like I've certified an employee to do this work and now he's left and he's going to work for one of the bigger companies here in Hampton Roads because he has that credential. So we want that credential to allow both them to do the work, to allow some degree of workforce mobility, perhaps on surge capacity support work. But we can't do it, on the backs of the smaller companies here in Hampton Roads who feel like it's just hurting them. So there's a real concern there, and we can't ignore that.
Exactly. So I think this is probably the final question, maybe one more. The question is this: SAM is primarily focused on architect and engineering firms. AWEA is for offshore wind. So SAME and AWEA already partner. So what is the association that would compare to SAME for MIBE, and are they in Hampton Roads?
I don't quite understand exactly that linkage. When you say a partner association for us, we work with, right now we're working with NCCER, which does the national accrediting and credentialing of what I'd call construction side trade programs. And so they develop a nationally recognized curriculum for those programs. We're working with them along with NSRP to figure out how we could adapt those to the maritime workforce. We are strongly partnered with IILR, who's already demonstrated how to do this, although their programs aren't maritime focused. One of the issues that we face here as we drive these programs down in the middle schools and high schools and community colleges, you're now dealing with state level certification processes. And so you can't just say, well, we're going to implement this program at a high school because MIBE wants to do it. We have to meet their certification requirements. One of the reasons ILR is such an attractive partner for us is they've already done this at both the high school, the middle school, and the community college level within the state of Virginia. And so now we're just talking about modifying those programs slightly to the maritime, to be maritime focused. hopefully still meeting those credentialing requirements at the state level for those institutions. NCCR's program would be attractive if we can get those things to a point where now they feel like they can take those curriculums we developed. And again, going back to my conversation about the Navy, that if we're able to develop them in this ecosystem and apply them here, that then taking them, they've been certified at the Virginia state level, they've been worked with NCCR to be, nationally exportable. Now you might be able to apply them in San Diego or Jacksonville, and then get some sort of national credentialing, process going on. And that leads me to my last partner there, which is SNEDIA, the Southeast New England Defense Industrial Alliance, who does this type of work, MIBE related work, up in New England in support of Electric Boat. And that natural partnership, again, with Newport News Shipbuilding on the Columbia and Virginia class submarines is really one of the things we've seized on. And then finally, we work very closely with the AME, the Association for Manufacturing Excellence. A lot of the skills that we're talking about here and the technologies that are coming in with Industry 4.0 and 5.0, it's not just about the maritime. Again, if we get to that 10-year goal, as we develop these people and implement these technologies, we want to see that we're able to support all of the trades here in Hampton Roads. And so the maritime being obviously a large part of that, but a lot of those skill sets, especially as you go down the road, it might be, the lines might be blurred a little bit between what's required for the maritime industry and what's required in other construction industries here in Hampton Roads in Virginia. And so we're partnered with them. I hope that answered the question.
So final question, and I would certainly want to leave us on an optimistic note here, because we have so much to be excited about. If you had first of all, you've given us a lot of information, a lot of great ideas, and really point out some amazing things that are happening, but could happen. If you had to name one thing, maybe just one thing that you feel is probably one of the most exciting opportunities that we really need to capitalize on the region, just because of who we are, the time, what would that be? If you could just maybe close it out for us with that thought.
Well, I would get back to, we don't have a lack of effort here in Hampton Roads, and we don't have a lack of well-intentioned people. Lots of people have been, preceding my time here at MIBE, trying to get after this problem. But we have a different problem than, say, Danville did. Danville had, an existential threat to their survival there. They were a town that was focused on textiles and tobacco. And so when they were presented with the opportunity to make a significant investment in the future of the city there, it was kind of a lifeline to them. When I met with Mayor Alexander a week and a half ago, one of the things I said, here in Hampton Roads, the problem is it's a slow bleed. And so we haven't kind of been shocked in the reality that we have a real issue that we have to get after. And when I talk to industry partners, they're like, well, it's tough, but we're getting after it, and we're going to keep working it. And when I talk to government officials, yeah, we're working it. But we have 19 municipalities, and so really trying to, and there's been a lot of great work done here by lots of people. We've got to all get together and understand that I don't care if that career and technical education hub is physically located in Norfolk. I'm going to figure out how to get people from across the region there to get them trained and certified to do the work. And it's not just about Norfolk. And if the other one is in Newport News or the other one's in Suffolk, it's not just about those towns. I got to put them somewhere. But, again, it's all of us working together, and it will have a rising tide lifts all boats, as we say. It will have a positive impact on the rest of Hampton Roads. And so, as we know, the workforce that supports us isn't all sitting in Norfolk for Norfolk, and it's not sitting all in Newport News for Newport News. It comes from across the region. And so this has to be a regional effort. And that's what we're driving towards. Let's get everyone together, get everyone on the bus, and let's take it where we want it to go. But we have to understand that we do have a real issue. And I don't want to be sitting here in 7 years saying, we knew this was coming and we didn't do it. We didn't do enough to address the problem. And then we're looking back at kind of, a train wreck that we could have prevented. And obviously this year, 2020, has been a difficult year just because it's harder to get folks together, physically. But we do have a lot of energy and a lot of support. The effort that you're doing, I think, is calling a lot of attention to the things that we have to get after. And so I am optimistic because there are so many great people, so many great organizations, Hampton Roads Workforce Council, HRETA, the Go Virginia folks, Hampton Roads Alliance, the Chambers of Commerce. There are a lot of people that are helping us get after this. And now we got to get from kind of, again, admiring the problem and understanding the problem to addressing the problem and trying to fix it.
Great. Well, thank you. That was an awesome close. And thank you, Admiral Williamson, for your presentation today. We really appreciate it. Certainly gave a lot of thought and very, very good in-depth material. And Leanne, with that, I'm going to turn it back over to you. I believe you're at the break at this point.
Yep. Thank you so much. Just like we did before, we're going to take about a 15-minute break. We'll be back at 12:30. So I'd ask if you guys be prepared to be back at 12:30, grab yourself a sandwich or whatever for your lunch. Certainly you can eat while we take up the next program, which is the SIOP program. Thank you so much, Nancy and Admiral Williamson, for the great presentation. I think there's so many opportunities in this area, and I'm really excited about how SAME can partner with other organizations to, help keep us on the forefront of this great effort. So thank you again, and I appreciate your support of SAME, and we will see you guys back at 12:30. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for letting me